when we had a liberal Supreme Court. Nixon became president in '70. In 5 years, got 4 Supreme Court picks. We've been a conservative court system, which is to a level like a god, to a degree. All right. Yeah. It's a fail-safe. All right. So our voting does matter. So we tell our people that we know the Democratic Party is not doing for us. That's a hard fact. Is that the other party ain't done shit. That's just a hard fact. Now the Democratic Party, yeah, we've had some. The candidates haven't been perfect. They've had some slip-ups, but all of what we've got has come from one party. So we start this conversation about well, this candidate don't give us this, and this candidate don't give us that. We talk about the '94 crime bill. All right. Well, and I mentioned this to Devontae a few times. Well, you talk to kids in the inner city, and there's a segment of inner city kids that doesn't really give a damn about people that get locked up for peddling hard drugs, all right? Because what did they do on the other side of this? Okay, we saw our brothers go to jail for a certain period of time, 10, 20, 30 years, disproportionate to the white kids. But let's look to the other side of that. How did it really affect our community? When we had a young boy or young boy, and his parents fell victim to the drug epidemic in the 80s and 90s. Well, when their parents reached their hand out for that drug, there was someone that looked like me that gave them that drug. All right? So there's an implicit responsibility that we also have in this. So you ask the kids around the country that were in the hundreds of thousands that are in the social service systems, the foster care systems. You ask them, would they really give it? And I use these words to kind of get to drive on the point. You ask them, they really give a damn about 100,000 black brothers being put away for peddling hard drugs. Now I'm not talking about selling. I'm not talking about the ones that was caught with a little bit of this and was getting. I'm not talking the one-offs. All right. And I very rarely discuss the one-offs because I give a comparison to this. There are a lot of people struck from lightning. It's hard as hell to try to find them. All right. So that's why I don't get into these conversations where we have something that's like 2 or 3%. Was it what this happened to me? Well, we can't get to the point where something happens to 3, 4, 5% of us, and we make it out 95%. Because it's all about the culture in itself. Mm-hmm. So these conversations that we have about Democrat and Republican, we got to put a hard truth out there. I'm not sure of people's ages, but in our existence, 90% of what we got was from a Democratic president in Congress. The Republican side has promised it. All right, they haven't delivered. All right, but he throws the party right now throws those red meats out there. And yes, some of our brothers have benefited, make money. They benefited from it. No one wants to pay taxes. Democrat, Republican, no one wants to pay taxes. All right.
But I will say this though. All of that is true. Mm-hmm. But we, even in the Democratic Party, know one fact. We suck at messaging. We can't message at all. So it's like, all of that is true. How do you bundle that to tell somebody who maybe didn't even graduate high school all of this information, who doesn't know what a Supreme Court is, who doesn't know how long a justice is, who doesn't know how long someone gets appointed, and then back on another point, which I 1,000% agree with, and that's from a book that you suggested, which I don't know if I can shamelessly plug. The mythology of black inferiority complex. Yeah. That right there is talking about the accountability aspect, how we glorify certain aspects of our life and then get mad or point the finger when another community does it when we don't address it within ourselves. But we do, as this leftist side, have to, one, message correctly and learn how to message, because the other side murders us in messaging. And then two, we do have to make a lot more progress because it's more establishment Democrats that are actually able to progress more than progressive Democrats.
But Devontae, I'd like to piggyback on this. What's your name, brother?
Marvin. I'm sorry, Marvin, bro. Sorry for that.
Because you came in, we didn't get your
introduction. Yeah, sorry for that.
Yeah, let me just piggyback on what you just said. You talked about Republican versus Democrat. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the time period we're talking about. I got here in 2006, 2007. When I was a staff member in the legislation in 2009. You had a whole lot of folks that don't look like most of the men in this room, Caucasian men, that ran on the Democratic Party line and won all across the state. And that January session started is when Deal became governor. They all decided, oh, I'm a Republican now. And when I looked to the caucus meeting for the Democrats in the state house, they were 95% black. I went to the caucus meeting in the state senate, 95% black. In one fell swoop, they racialized politics in Georgia and changed the dynamic in the paradigm. We was said, who's gonna win this election? It's not gonna be black men, it's gonna be white women. So the issue is, where are progressives, white folks in this state, that are gonna stand up with the Democratic Party and balance this out? Where are they? Where are those voices? The issue is Republican, Democrat? No. The issue is racist or non-racist. And the racists left the Democratic Party and took over the Republican Party all over this country.
Southern strategy from Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon, that's correct. You got it. Exactly right. So it's important that when we talk about this, we have to have a reference as to what we're talking about and where. And one last thing on the party issue. In the state of Georgia, you do not get the opportunity to enroll in a party. You register to vote as a voter. On primary day when you go to vote, if there's a Republican primary and a Democratic primary, they ask you, which ballot do you want? Well, today I'm gonna be Republican because I want to vote for Herschel Walker, so make sure he's in the runoff against our future senator, Raphael Warnock. There's no enrollment, which means you're not identified as a party member when it comes time to vote in a primary or run in a primary. This is new to me. I came from the North. And you cannot run in a Democratic primary or a Republican primary unless you are enrolled and a member of that party. Down here, we don't know what you are or who you are.
Yeah, we're an open primary state.
That's correct.
Whereas Florida is a closed primary state, Pennsylvania is a closed primary state, New York's a closed primary state.
That's correct. That's correct. And that's why you see folks playing this game about what they really are. So it's about the issues. This young man, what he was talking about, it's about the issues. Where do you stand as a candidate or as a party on what's going to affect and benefit my family and my community? That's what I want to know.
And then if we don't get it, go back. Just like the white Appalachian, they'll come down, they'll get in their minivans, they'll come down and vote. They'll ask this politician for, I want a 2 traffic lights and a yield sign. They come back and say, well, I can't get you 2 traffic lights and a yield sign. I'll get you 1 traffic light, I'll give you a yield sign, I'll give you some money to the bake sale. Okay, we're gonna get in our minivans and come back there and we're gonna get you again. We don't say, you didn't give us nothing, we don't want it. So we have, and it's reflective of our community. We have this goal of perfection. And then people leave here today, think about when you have progress and perfection, we know that perfection doesn't exist.
No.
All right, and
But
no
do we
fast.
know that?
Yeah, oh yeah, we do know. But we don't repeat it. We know it, but we don't internalize it.
Well, I bring up that point. I'm sorry to interrupt you. But what's the message they teach us going into these workforces?
Be the best you can. Be perfect.
We gotta
Be twice as good.
You see, so back to your point. If they are feeding that to us as I knew from yay high before I could walk. I knew what I got to be better than you. You could feel the inequality in the air, right? And so we learn at an early age what we got to compete to be the what. The best. We take over the NBA. We done took over daggone football.
Pickleball next, baby.
Yeah. I mean, globally, the African countries taking over soccer. You know, like.
So
I mean,
let me jump in here because I love what he said. It's the battle between perfection and progress, but I think we don't ground it enough in real history. That's why I asked you that question when you said from 53 to 69 or so, we had a progressive liberal core. Well, if you ask Dwight David Eisenhower his biggest mistake, he would say the biggest mistake I ever made is sitting in the Supreme Court, and his name was Earl Warren. Because Earl Warren was a conservative when he took over the court. And I think this history, this glorified history of the civil rights movement is missing some context. The context is the lawyers that were present in the civil rights movement that sued enough to change the course of the policies and the decisions that were coming out of the Supreme Court.
Like Marshall.
Thurgood, C.B. King, Fred Gray, all, because during that period, yes, folks were marching, they were protesting, but the end of the Montgomery bus boycott happened because of a Supreme Court case, Gale versus Browder, which effectively outlawed segregation on public transportation. So if we ground our movement history in the actual, in the mud every day, we can see that. So yeah, we got 6 hard conservatives on this court right now, right? If we can't swing it in an electoral victory, we can swing it in a legislative victory and a litigation strategy. Because here's the thing that even the most staunch, racist, crazy Supreme Court justice, his name was Anton Scalia. I will never forget this as long as I live. 2001, I'm at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. I asked Justice Scalia a question. He's the one that came up with originalism, and the Constitution is not a living document. It should be strictly construed the way that it's written.
And
all right?
Scalia was also one of the first chapter heads, I think.
Oh, the Federalist Society.
Yeah, Federalist Society.
I'm going somewhere with this. Okay, so if I understand that's his judicial philosophy, now I have to craft litigation to take apart his philosophy. So what I'm saying is, it's the same thing that Charles Hamilton Houston did to create the civil rights movement. If you don't know who Charles Hamilton Houston is, okay. So if you create a legion of lawyers to take a litigation strategy to outlaw everything segregation, we should be able to do the same thing with everything systemic racism. But we have to play, and this is where you're going, we have to play the long game. Our community thinks that perfection happens. First off, perfection ain't achievable. And progress was a strategy. The strategy was to get them in court over and over and over and over and over again. So you have a line of cases in the pipeline, so that at the point that they make one mistake, that one mistake was Brown v. Board. And it created precedent that we can now use. My point is this. So let's just say, and this has happened in the voting rights space, we have one of the most conservative courts ever, right? But Alabama just got a supermajority district. Georgia got a supermajority district. Mississippi got a supermajority district. Why? Because the Voting Rights Act is still good law. Section 2 is still good law because it was written in a way that you have to strictly construe the statute. Right. Why am I saying all this? Because in our community, we have been divorced of our real history. Really, how they did it in the mud in the 50s, in the 60s, how it was a strategy on multiple levels, electoral, legislative, litigative levels. And that's what we have to do to return to the progress that we are seeing. But we can't allow voices to come into our community who don't have our best interests to reimagine or rewrite history in a way that is not going to move us forward. Last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to take my NAACP hat off, but I am on the back here. In the back it says we are nonpartisan, but we are political as hell. All right? So we always talk about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. I don't talk about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. What I talk about is the Dixiecrats. Where are the Dixiecrats right now?
They're Republican.
They are in the Republican Party. That's right. And so as long as we have an active Klan rally in a party, we cannot participate in that party. Correct. Because if there's an active Klan rally, you have the Southern strategy that has been effectuated. That's correct. Now here's the solution that I think we can choose, as well as a litigation strategy, the electoral strategy. The reason the Southern strategy worked is because of racism.
Yes, sir.
But where do most black people live?
In the South.
In the South. So if we have large populations of black people in the South, we can have a reverse Southern strategy.
That's correct.
We can litigate supermajority districts to take back Congress and to write new civil rights legislation that now we can use in the courts to push back on the voter suppression, to push back on the erasure of black history, to push back on the erasure of women's reproductive rights. But it's a long strategy.
Yes,
This
sir.
is a 100-year
Thank you.
strategy because, again, from 1865 to 1965 was what? 100 years.
Yes.
And now we are in the second 100 years that they're trying to roll us back. So we talking about they want to take us back 50 years?
Yes, sir.
We got to make sure we keep the 50 years and think about the next 100 years. And so that's why I'm saying we got to teach our people this is a long game.
Right.
They play the long game.
Absolutely.
And if we don't play the long game, we will be doomed to be talking about the same thing 100 years from now. Because again, the Federal Society been planning this since 1971.
Thank you.
Justice Scalia, I'm gonna close. So I asked him a question. I'm sitting in my
Take your title.
I'm sitting in my common law class, and they were talking about some of his rulings, and so he came to he gave a talk, right? And so we're in the auditorium. He's giving this talk about his judicial philosophy and all these things, and then he asked, "Are there any questions?" Silence fell over the room. So I raised my hand. Justice Scalia, I had a question. So you're an originalist, right? Yeah. And so you believe that the Constitution should be interpreted the way it's written, right? He's like, yes. I said, well, let me ask you a question. How do we interpret a Constitution that when it was written for white, rich, landowning, male
Yes.
Southerners?
Period.
But now, in 2001, the country is more diverse, it's more inclusive, more people have rights. So how can we construe the Constitution to be how it's written to now? Now at that point I was a living document believer. I actually believe now the Constitution should be construed the way it's written. I'll get to that in a minute. So he said, he paused, he got mad. And he said, that's why I don't have conversations with you darn liberals, because y'all always are trying to misconstrue my words. I said, well, you said you wanted the Constitution to be, exactly, he couldn't answer, to be interpreted the way it's written. Now, back to why I say it should be interpreted the way it's written. There's no exception to the Fourth Amendment, the way the document is written. There's no exception to the 14th Amendment. There's no exception to the 15th Amendment. There's no exception to the 16th Amendment. There's definitely no exception to the 19th Amendment. But what you have going on right now is conservative activist judges that are carving out exceptions. They literally carved out an exception for affirmative action, even though affirmative action is constitutionally protected. And so what I'm positing is this. If we know how our opposition thinks, we know that they're playing the long game, we know that they are using individuals in our community to play on our worst fears, namely, we haven't made enough progress, y'all still ain't got reparations, y'all really don't have voting rights, man, we rolling everything back. We play the long game. In this election, in every election, we make sure, like the Appalachians, man, okay, I want 2 traffic lights and a stop sign. All right, well, I can't get 2 traffic lights and a stop sign, so I'm gonna get 1 stop sign, some bold lanes on the side, and maybe a blinking light. We get that. The next election, all right, still want that stop sign. Let's get the stop sign. Okay, now we got the stop sign. Oh, now we want flying vehicles. I think that's how we have to message to our community, because let's be clear, man. We all saw what they're doing in affirmative action. We see what they're trying to do to voting rights. We see they took women's reproductive rights. Hey, they trying to erase black history. They trying to say Rosa sat down because she was tired. And that, you know,
slavery was a job creation.
yeah, it was job creation. And they came over on boats because that was a cruise from over across seas. So that's all I'm saying.
Immigrants too. You didn't know that?
Yeah, we were immigrants with indentured servants.
Yeah, we came over to.
So I want to say this, because I think it hits a lot of what has been said, and you can preach in my church next week. But you asked how. A little while ago you said how, and I I think what we just communicated is a lot of how, right? Messaging must be adapted, right? We can't just throw something out there and hope it sticks. We need to figure out what are the things that are important to us. If we're going to play the long game, how do we message it in a way that can go towards everybody, right? Because I fully embrace, I have education privilege, right? You have education privilege, and so how do we make it palatable for those that don't have the access to education that we've had? And then when we talk about how, going back to even the real estate question, right? I know that there are people that have the knowledge to communicate. I know there are people with nonprofits that are communicating this, but they don't have the marketing, so we don't know they exist. And so I would say there's a part of this where we got to figure out who are these pockets of people in our community. I know that.
We gonna toss to him. He been quiet. He been quiet. I'm like, Chris.
We talk beforehand. That's why.
Yeah, I'm like, he been quiet. Yeah.
But we talk about how it's communicating.
Right.
Let's not look for perfection. We're looking for perfection because of this.
Yeah.
But it's communicating. This is the real history.
Yeah.
And so I think we have the bones to how, but then it becomes, we gotta be mobilized and able to articulate these aspects of what we're saying, because there are people. I work in nonprofit, y'all, and I work in churches. Two things I know very, very well is that there are churches really in the trenches, despite what the media wants to say, and that there are nonprofits that don't have the access and the marketing that are doing the work in our communities to transform our communities. And if we are able to grasp those entities and say, now, we need you to help with messaging. We need you to get to the lowest common denominator in our communication so that it don't have to be $15 words. Let's get to the words that my boys on Godby Road understand. Like we were talking about earlier, right? If you're on the south side of Atlanta, let's talk about that. If you're on Campbellton Road, let's talk the way we need to talk to get the point across so that we understand. No, it's not perfection, but we do need to package something to be able to say, progress has looked like, man. We asked for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 1, 3, and a half, 4.
Yeah.
Let's keep pushing. And so that's why I did it on purpose, because I was talking to Chris earlier, and I know some great stuff that Chris is doing. However, I also have worked in some big box nonprofits that we don't have a marketing issue.
Yeah.
But a lot of our nonprofits in our communities that are really close to the issues, that are really entrenched in the communities, they just have a messaging challenge. They have a marketing challenge. They have a challenge in terms of knowledge, And so I wanted to toss it up to Chris on purpose because I think that's a big part of how.
But before you answer, I want my man Herb over here that done slid off into the dark.
Herb definitely hid behind that wall.
To know he ain't. No, because listen, me and Herb done had some real conversations too about, because a lot of folks just think this is a South Side issue. The money don't run through our community. 70% of our people are in poverty, under poverty. So you can move to Sandy Springs, you can move to Buckhead. Look, Po is Po.
Yeah.
So, Herb, I want you to tap in as well.
I'm just gaining a lot of knowledge from this brother here.
Yeah, I know, but I need
think
you to tap in.
me and this brother mission is a little different. You're pastor, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in the barbershop. So we're at the ground level. So I'm here to get education to educate the young folks. I mean, you can touch them a different way. And then we bring in the lawyer. We get our knowledge from the lawyers, and we teach these young kids.
Yeah.
Which is their energy as warriors. So we have to channel their energy into learn. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to start with these kids. That starts the process. But me being 40 plus years old, I'm still learning. So it's like you got to go seek, then you bring it back and teach the kids. I touch all bodies of life like you do as well. So out here in Sandy Springs, they have no guidance for the black child.
Right.
They are homeless kids that sleep behind high schools. These are things I'm getting now. There are schools with 2 counselors in the whole high school. You know what I'm saying? So these kids are getting more demolished because they're around rich people, and now their mission is they're stealing out here. They're doing all the things to try to survive. How does 4 kids sleep behind high school a whole year? You don't find out until you demolish the high school. I'm confused. You know what I mean? How does that happen? And it's supposed to be an education out here. You just skipping these kids through out here. So I'm listening and learning from him, so then I can downplay it and try to build these kids up to put their energy somewhere else. You know what I mean? Because we dealing with some. Church is not the backbone of the kids is just not brought to church.
Oh, I know.
My grandmother's bring me to church, mothers, you know what I'm saying? And in the barbershop, you got children coming with all types of attitudes. You know what I mean? They letting them do vape pens in school, so we got to start tapping into us. I understand when we talking about parties and all that, I'm getting educated, but if we can't get these kids' mindset turned somewhere else, we doomed anyway. And that's a whole nother conversation me and him have. There's no rec center, there's nothing. Boys and Girls Club, I was raised in Boys and Girls Club. There's nothing. Mentor program, there's no mentors in the high school. I play basketball, I go to a mentor, I have mother and father, but there's no, these kids have no guidance no more. The young women don't have no guidance, the boys don't have no guidance. So my mission is I'll take this knowledge, but I'm trying to take it in to teach these kids how to focus on growth. There is no perfection, I agree with him. You know what I mean? But still I have to teach these kids how to move forward. I am on Godby Road, I'm on County Road, I used to cut us out to Cat Mall. I be in Union City, you know what I mean? You know, I'm around a lot of these brothers, but these young kids are lost. And I think that starts with the black man. Just be real. We ain't even having conversations in the living room. If we ain't sitting at the table putting the phone down, so where we going? You know what I mean? The message comes from the leaders, right?
Yes, sir.
We'll talk about that later.
Hold on, Seth.
What I found the biggest key with the youth, and I've heard everybody, I received everything everybody said, but for me, my experience is being consistent, you know, and as the young people say now, apply that pressure. You gotta apply that pressure to them, whether they want to hear it or not. You gotta apply that pressure. You gotta stay consistent. And what I've done, with what I've been able to accomplish, I use my fancy cars and my flashy supercars. It's a conversation piece, because now you're willing to listen to me more, because you're looking at that trying to figure out. That's the first thing they ask me. Hey, OG, man, how you get that, man? I'm trying to get like you, OG. And boom, now I got you. So now the message and knowledge that I'm gaining from you all, I'm turning around and spinning on them. So now I got you wide open. Now I got you coming here, following me. I got you. First thing I ask you, hey man, I need the link. I need a link. You know, people want to hear what's going on. I need a link. So we have to, as black men and as a culture now, we have to, and me and you had this conversation over breakfast, man. We gotta out with the old, in with the new. We gotta find a way to close the gap so we can meet them where they are. You know, we say, hey, education the issue. Hey, it may be the issue, but we all know how it was growing up. Yeah, we learned a few new words, but I know what slime mean. I know what scam mean. I know what putting it on your head means. So if I gotta talk like that to get your attention so you can understand and receive what I'm saying. There's a lot of people hear you, but I need you to understand what I'm saying. So now that you're understanding what I'm saying, and it's saying it's simple. You know, if you get the mind, the body will follow. You gotta meet them where you are. You gotta speak their language, and you can't put something on them. And I found myself doing that. I expect them to just know. They're not gonna just know. You have to teach them. You gotta stay consistent, and you have to apply that pressure. So that's what I've been able to do. And that's what's been working. So.
You know, just real quick too. I think what's so important about what you do is also your background.
Yeah.
We really talk a lot about that too, so we can really.
Oh yeah, most definitely. So for me, I went into the military because my parents didn't have it just like that. So I got accepted at Savannah State College, but I knew early on, you know, I was just immature in certain ways. Because my mom, she was a single mom, she had a tight hold on me. So I knew early on what I wanted to do. That was just something that was just embedded in me. So I chose going the military route. I went to the Marine Corps. Ended up getting out of the Marine Corps. I was in for 8.5 years, and I went into law enforcement because my whole thing was I wanted to get into law enforcement and be an impact to my community. You know, that's what I thought. But then when I began working and I began to understand and grow and see things, not only as a man but as a black man, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we only doing roadblocks on this side of the road? What you mean I can't do that on this? And now I'm beginning to ask questions. Now I'm getting moved to a higher crime area because I'm a little too much for this side of town. I'm a little bit too much for this zone. So, you know, as I'm beginning to see those things and understand those things, and then the Black Lives Matter movement came around, you know, we start seeing it again. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. And now I'm beginning to see stuff. I thought we was cool because we both, that's how you really feel? Oh, this ain't for me. This ain't what I signed up for. This ain't for me. you know, that was all smoke and mirrors. So I moved into a lane that I knew that I could flourish from, which was being an entrepreneur. And then two, I could come back and say, hey, this is what I did and this is how you do it. So that's just a little bit about me.
So I want to piggyback on that. I worked in law enforcement too, so I was a prosecutor for 7 years. And it was a path that I never imagined that I would do, based on how I grew up and my family's struggles and interactions with law enforcement. Seeing my mom go through the system so many times. But I remember when I first started in, it's the same eye-opening experiences when I'm in a courtroom and I'm like, okay, why is this person being offered diversion but that person isn't? Where the criminal histories are exactly the same, but they don't look the same. And so I'm like, well, underneath my suit, I look like this, because that's where I'm from. And if these are the people that you want me to treat this way, I just can't do that. So I found myself bucking the system a lot and putting people in diversions who the system didn't want there. And then you get exposed to, well, conviction rates mean more money. So, oh, this is about money. So it's not about people's lives and helping people fix their lives or correct their lives. It all comes down to dollars and cents. And so I'm going to tell you a real story and be specific with it. And the point that I'm making is the point that we've been having this whole talk, right? Messaging. How do you do that? You got to personalize it, right? You got to make it something that somebody can really visualize versus just speaking in generalities, speaking in parables. I think if you make something where somebody can see themselves in the story, that's how we start to see some of the progress. So in 2020, after bucking the system for so long, I said, you know what? I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. I'm gonna run for DA. And I'm gonna run to try to change this system in the ways that I think it should be changed based off a lot of this BS that I'm seeing. So I have a meeting with Mary Norwood, a very wealthy white woman from Buckhead, and about 14 of her friends from the Buckhead business community. And you know, the meeting lasted about an hour. They saying all the right things, but the last 2 minutes of the meeting, Mary says, Christian, if you want my money, if you want my endorsement, if you want my support, you gotta be willing to publicly say that you will put juvenile youth for offenders on a prison farm as a way of rehabilitation. Without thinking, my gut reaction, what I said back to Mary, that sounds like slavery. Mary's face turned bright red, turned around, and left. That was the end of the meeting. 2 weeks later, somebody else was in the race who came in with that endorsement and that money, but I won't say that. Y'all know. But the point that I'm making is that we've been talking about long game, right? Long game in terms of disenfranchising black families. And like you mentioned, that the black men are not at home in the living room, it's not having these conversations. It all stems back to the criminal justice system. It all stems back to the educational system. And if you have a system where the difference between crack and cocaine, how they were sentenced differently, right? All of the things that were done in the war on drugs in that time period, where we saw black families continually being over-policed, over-prosecuted, over-incarcerated, right? What that did to our families, what that did to our neighborhoods, and our school systems, and our families. All of these things have a direct link. And the last thing I'll say, again, putting the specifics on the story, before I took that job as a prosecutor, my first job out of law school, I worked in Atlanta City Council for 2 years. I was chief of staff for Council District 5. And every 10 years, there's a census, right? And every city has to, when they do the redistricting maps, you have to send those to the DOJ. And if your numbers shift racially too much in an area, you have to do reports. There's all this extra red tape of explaining why. But what the DOJ wants you to do is submit what they call the least retrogressive alternative. So in the district that I worked in, the numbers were shifting. From, at one point it was like 60% black, but the numbers that they were turning, now we were down like 30% black. So that's a red flag for the DOJ. Why? Why is this happening? Well, we know why that's happening. Everybody in this room understands gentrification. Everybody in this room understands when big corporations come in and buy big apartment complexes and overpriced, and then you see people who look like us get displaced and have to move. But what we don't think about, long game, right? How is that going to impact voting? How is that going to impact super districts or majority districts? How is it going to impact who's the elected official over that area? So there are a lot of things that I applaud you for doing this, because we're going to have to continue this conversation so that we can keep learning the stuff that we don't know and how do we process this information and go to our individual lanes to make the impacts when we have these conversations with people one-on-one. But all of this stuff, as Gerald said, they've been playing a 100-year game.
Yes, sir.
And in that 100-year game, we didn't have the access to the education because we weren't allowed to. We didn't have the access to the capital because they wouldn't give it to us. We were the product or the resource for them that they made them their capital. So now that we're starting to get this stuff and learn this stuff and know this stuff, we got to continue to keep doing this room. And brother, you said the right word, consistency. This cannot be a one-time conversation. I don't know if we're going to do this quarterly, we're going to do this however long we're going to do it, but we got to do this again.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing going to happen.
And not even to cut you off. I mean, with me, I know how I am with business. I mean, I look at it. I mean, this is bigger than we probably realize. This need to be a weekly, almost like a podcast thing. People need to hear this. You know, people most definitely need to hear this. You know, it needs to be a space, like you said, where we can just be. I just like to call it being emotionally naked. Yeah. That's what I like.
I like that.
Just being emotionally naked. You know, like, hey, emotionally naked. You know, it's people that need to hear this. It has to be a consistency piece because, like you said, after the election, then what?
Yeah.
Then what?
And I agree with y'all, because I think one of the things that people don't realize is you don't even start to understand politics until you in it, right? If you're not in politics, that stuff going over your head. And let me tell you, I didn't understand gentrification until old girl got in trouble about the Fearless Fund stuff, right? We were sitting there having a conversation about this at the NAACP. The reason why the Supreme Court has struck her down is because guess where the money comes from, y'all?
Tell them.
Taxpayers.
Not just taxpayers.
It's the police pension funds, all this stuff, right? So of course, if the money comes from taxpayers, you can't run around and say, I'm just giving this to black women, right? Because it came from taxpayers, it came from everybody. What they've done that beats us down every time is, right, they have these hedge funds. They may not tell you, hey, well, my bad, I'm not gonna say may. They're not gonna tell you it's just for a certain demographic, right? They just gonna give it to them.
Right.
Whereas she said, I'm just giving this to black women. And of course, if you're trying to hoard the cash, like, oh man, that's my competition. And she just giving it to black women? Oh no, we're gonna sue you over there because we know where the money come from. And that's the conversation we gotta have too. We talking about economics, but we're not talking about where the money come from.
But we need to put our money in our businesses. So the fund that you are talking about, had all wealthy folks put that money in the fund, there would have been no court case because it would have been your money, not taxpayers' money.
Or if they had have just got in touch with the lawyers, and the lawyers when they started the fund be like, you know, not that I think the Supreme Court will be right, but what if you do the application process where it highlights the people that you want, and it's an open application process, but then you choose who you want based on your criteria.
But everybody has to be on the
Everybody's allowed to compete.
That's what colleges do.
Oh, we talking now, though. We talking.
Welcome to the civil rights movement. Where they had dance meetings where the lawyers were present.
I just wanted to chime in about the long game. The long game. Well, I found this great quote on the internet the other day. Time to remember the best voting advice I have heard. Voting is not marriage. It's public transport. You are not waiting for the one who is absolutely perfect. You are getting the bus. And if there isn't one going exactly to your destination, you don't stay at home and sulk. You take the one going closest to where you want to be.
That's right.
That's right.
And you hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I came in late. My name's
You good, brother?
Richard McDaniel.
Hey, Rich, it's been a while.
I
Good to see you, bro.
saw you over there. I was like, oh, he was dropping some jewels earlier. So, you know, I've been in the political space for probably 18, 19 years. We do have, I've been at the heights of where a black man could be on the other side of a political campaign. We do have a messaging problem. And the problem with the messaging is when it's created, it's only one or two people in the room, right? Instead of, if there's layers to this, right? Having someone like a barber in there who can take the message that we have and be able to say, okay, I'm gonna say it to my people like this. Someone that's an attorney in there to say, okay, we'll be able to say it to my people like this, right? To where we can take it to the accounting roles, the west sides, the bank heads, the, you know, I was about to say Bond Homes, but it's no longer there, right? You know, the Bluff, you know what I'm saying? Godby Road, like those areas, even down into areas that we're not even thinking about, you know, Clayton County, you know, things of this nature. One of the things that bothered me with Vice President Harrison's first visit to Atlanta was she came to Atlanta, and for the longest, and they'll tell you, I've been cracking their skulls about when they come to do political bits in Georgia, they go straight to Atlanta. You know, I got in trouble when I brought Bill Clinton to North Clayton High School.
Come on.
Right? I got in trouble when I was pushing to get Hillary to do her black lunch, not at Clark, Atlanta, but to take it to Albany, to take it to Savannah, to take it to Fort Valley. Right? You're gonna get the same crowd, you're just gonna get a different impact. And so, you know, now they're starting to treat Georgia after, you know, I've still been harping behind the scenes. We see that she was in, you know, Savannah doing a little buzz tour. They're starting to treat it like it is a battleground state. But that's just all over, right? They still, like this conversation, glad it's happening, but it's happening when we're 70 days out, 60 days out, right? This needs to be happening when we're 2 years out, 3 years out. It's that long game that we keep talking about, right? I met this gentleman 2012.
That's right.
Right? They brought me back down. I was working for the Democratic Party in Ohio. Right? And they brought me back down to run Obama's re-election campaign here, but they said, we're not putting any money in your state. Remember?
Yep.
Right? We're just gonna give you enough money to pay for an office.
Yep.
Well, I flipped that and opened up 3 offices across the state, maybe even 4, I don't even remember. But then we used volunteer power and volunteer money to take people to North Carolina and Florida to educate them about voting, because those were the 2 states that we needed to win. But we were able to build teams across the state. And some of them still exist, right? I know a lot of them continue to work and do stuff for Stacy, like the Cobb County team was probably one of the strongest teams. South Fulton was another strong team.
That's right, that whole South Fulton crew that was with that campaign 2012 became the Fulton County Dems in South Fulton.
Right.
The whole crew.
Right, the whole crew. Taught them, you know, the basics, and then taught them how to take the language that the Obama campaign gave us, write it in your own words, make it small, short, sweet, and simple. And I mean, we had that office pumping, jumping, East Point was jumping, downtown was jumping. So when you talk about it, and Christian, you know, being modest, but, and some of you talked about it, it's the people that we are electing, and I hate to say it.
Thank you.
Right? It is, I could look at some of them as cowards. They kowtow walk the Democratic line, and I've gotten in trouble by saying that, and I'll continue to say it, right? We are elected people who don't have the interest of the public at heart. It's more selfish, right? This is a celebrity contest, and so one of the toughest things out there is to be a soldier in the community, because when you meet individuals who don't get it, who don't want to get it, who really say they don't care, but then they complain about getting locked up, and then they complain about sitting in jail for almost 90 days and then getting released, not knowing that there's, you know, this could easily be solved if you would just push that button for that person, right? When they came knocking at your door, or they wanted 5 minutes of your time, you turned them down. But we also just have to do a better job of putting people out there. Like, digital is great, it's cool, but nothing beats one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, right?
That's why the Harris campaign has opened 24 field offices across the state, because this state is one of them. I mean, most recent polls have Harris leading the state by 1 to 2 points.
But right, it takes more than that.
Right.
You can have, how many offices in Stacey Abrams have across the state, right? Right? So it's not like, you look at Dante, when Dante ran, the other downside, and we had 2 candidates, I don't know who else was a candidate, but Dante and Christian, they could have won had they been well funded. Not even well funded, just funded.
That's right.
Right?
Just
They had to get their message out there, right? We can have the best messaging in the world, but if you can't deliver it and put it out there in the streets, I mean, TV, radio, direct mail, digital, right? There's so many ways to skin a cat, but I can't skin a cat if I'm using a butter knife. You know what I'm saying?
Well said, Richard. Well said, my brother.
I'm gonna use it.
Well said.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah.
I mean, with you being in the levels in politics that you've been in or are in, do you think that there's an elitist mentality?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
do you think an elitist mentality is what's also keeping one of the blackest cities like Atlanta still down?
Yep.
Woo! Woo! I'm not trying to get in trouble.
Yeah, coming from HBCUs, even coming from HBCUs where there are cliques, right? And you don't get to assimilate with everybody, even coming from FAMU. There's different socioeconomic classes even within our community. But I'll speak on it afterwards.
I'm rocking the Morehouse. But I'm gonna tell you right now, we look at ourselves as the upper echelon HBCUs.
Right? So it is the dynamic, and I would, if I can't, I'm gonna let you finish it now.
I'm doing.
I wanted to piggyback off that with what you were saying about who we elect, in elitism, and I'm saying that it's often the reason why people don't vote. And why a lot of African American men, when you look at the numbers we vote, for the Democratic people, the least out of the worst out of black women, we're the worst performing. They vote more than we do. It's because black men don't get the results from our governments. And so when you go to court, you're dealing with child support, you're dealing with the criminal justice system, you're trying to get benefits. Black men are not getting the success with their government, so it's automatically a mentality it's pointless for me to do this because it's not going to affect what I do, because black men pull themselves up by their bootstrap. That is what black men do, because we don't have that ability. Ain't nobody saving us, so we know that. And then you have that dynamic where and then it's the conspiracy theory thing. It's the apathy thing, because you can't get any results, and so you don't vote. And you're like, how does this affect me and what I do every day? I'm not going to, even when my dad, rest his soul, went to get Social Security disability, right? And you look at the systemic racism and you see where he had liver disease, but because somebody did the application wrong, and I can't get to Pensacola, from the people who do it, the disability determination people, he doesn't get disability, he gets SSI. So then he doesn't have enough money to live. And so imagine somebody like him, right, who he knew better, but still, all of these different outcomes, these negative outcomes from interacting with their government. That's what public policy is, right? It's the way the people interact with the government. So that transcends beyond politics. Politics are the ones who administer it, but it's a public policy thing, right? What is the policy? How does it affect you and your family? And then the people who may be ignorant, right, or unresourceful, because that's what I'll call it. You're not resourceful. You're not going to the workforce and getting a WIOA grant because you lost your job, or you have a barrier to employment and getting a high demand skill because you don't know about it, right? You're not educated on these resources that your government is for. We pay taxes for this. You have people who are brainwashed into thinking that they shouldn't take anything from the government, right? Like you shouldn't ask for benefits, or you shouldn't do anything, and you got to get it on your own. Well, we built this country, so why wouldn't you utilize the resources that not only you may have paid taxes for, but your parents may have paid taxes for? So I just think that with the youth and with younger people, and even with more ignorant people, and I don't mean that negative, I just is ignorant to policy and how it affects them, you have to make it translate. Like, this is how this affects you in your everyday life. Because the people that they are experiencing
are making them distrust the government because we're not getting the outcomes, and it's even our people. When you speak to the elitism, and like you were speaking to, they put our people, right, in the front lines against ourselves, right? And so when you have people who are African American, who may be the head of the Georgia Commission for Equal Opportunity, African American lady, but when you utilize them and you see what happens to your complaints, whether it's an EEOC complaint or whether it's a fair housing complaint, right? And you see the outcome, and you see the botched investigations, and you see these people not doing their job, but their executive director is African American, whatever, a woman, or you see somebody, if you're trying to get rental assistance from, let's say, DeKalb County, right? And you're dealing with people who are not processing applications correctly. I'm just saying that you begin to distrust your government when you don't get the outcomes that you supposed to get.
I want to touch on just a small piece of the gem you just gave. When you mentioned how black men feel, I think Dante and Gerald threw this out earlier, how a lot of times black women are credited for the numbers that they do or how they're driving the party. I don't know how that narrative got started, but I hate it because it's divisive. When you say black women do this, black men do or don't do whatever, if you think about the historical impact on what has been done to the black family, I want us to start bringing the unity back. And like, yes, we give the credit to our sisters because they deserve it, but it shouldn't be what they doing and what we doing. It should be what we all doing together. When I think about I'm sorry, I think about for me, for my, like on an individual level, like I don't do nothing without my wife. Or when I get something good or I accomplish something, my wife is always the first person I thank for a shout out. And everything we do, business wise, whatever, it's together. It ain't no me versus her. Like it's us because we are a team, and that's what I want us to start shifting the narrative on that too, and bringing. And to his credit, he got Doug Jones elected as senator in Alabama, and I'm sorry I'm stealing your story, but they had, we were talking about messaging, right? They wanted to come to Alabama and do that, black men, black women. He said, no, we're gonna do black family, like the black families do X, Y, and Z. It wasn't we gonna separate out the women and the men. It's the same thing. I want us to start focusing that narrative back on that.
So the thing about that, he said he doesn't know when that narrative about black women saving black women party, it actually got more amplified from the Doug Jones race. Yes. Remember they'll say, oh, black women saved the party. And this is the stat that they throw out. They say, oh, black women voted at 98% in that race in Alabama. What they don't tell you is black men was at 93%.
Who's second strongest woman?
I want you to point to any race in this country, Obama included, where black men voted that high. And then I'll tell you to go look at our strategy. You know, the DNC tried their damnedest to come in and change the narrative. They tried to make that race the most national thing. And we pushed back, I fought back. No, don't send me anybody who can't say y'all, don't know what vegetable is. You know, I think Virginia had just ended and they were trying to send all the Virginia organizers down to Alabama. I said, if that shit don't border or touch Alabama, I don't want anybody, right? And so, you know, when you look at the narrative, and people will say, well, what you were doing was wrong. I did fish fries, and we did these fish fries to the magnitude of a political campaign. But we didn't do it. If we were in Birmingham, it wasn't downtown. We went to the poorest part of the neighborhood. And I called Randall, my Morehouse brother, one of my good friends, and said, where do you want us to go? I need you to go to this side of town. I'm cool. We got the grass cut, we got light bulbs changed, you know, and it was out to the entire community. And when you saw it, and they'll tell you, this is the first time I've ever seen black and white folks in this neighborhood chilling, sitting down at the table like it's a community church fish fry. And we did all across the state, and I mean, it turned out hundreds of people, right? But it was all presented as the black family. It just wasn't We didn't do black women for Doug Jones. We didn't do black men, none of that, right? It's, you know, the black family for Doug Jones, Alabama. So, you know, I come from an old school, I mean, shit. John Lewis was my homie, right? Andy Young, my homie, right? Reverend Lowry, my homie, and they taught me, you know, the old school way of doing things, about having conversation, right? So Rita Samuels was my homegirl, right? You know, so these are all Atlanta, but then I mixed that with a very national old school way of thinking, right? So, and we kind of get away from it because we still want to throw stuff up on TV. TV is great. TV is for people who watch TV,
There you go.
right? You know, we do digital stuff. Digital is great, but I don't know. Are you getting attacked with political ads on your phone now? No. Right? But they tell you that we can target him.
Yeah.
Right? This is the demographic that we need to target.
Yeah.
But you on TikTok, right? You on Instagram, right? You on X or Twitter, right? Right? Not getting targeted.
Yeah.
You know, those who want to cut the cable on YouTube TV, there's supposed to be a different, and sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. I actually get hit more with Donald Trump stuff than anything.
Yeah.
Are you getting hit with Donald Trump stuff?
Yeah.
Right?
Really?
Yes. I didn't got 4. Oh.
I get Zoom links. Send me, dog.
And I'm gonna be the first. I'll be the first to say this. I am disappointed in the state party that I once helped try to build and redo the infrastructure.
Yes.
It's a disappointment, but at the same time, we are like talk about the elitism. Well, it's when you are in an institution, any institution. Yeah, I don't care what it is, the church, a restaurant, whatever. There's an elitism going on.
Yeah.
How do you break it? I mean, you just continue to be the wild child and just rack it until somebody latches on to it. But you know.
Well, you know, just kind of hopping in on that. You know, that's one of the things. Devonta tell you, Joe tell you. I've been shouting from the mountaintops. Hey, man, we need to start talking about black family, right? Like that's got to be the message. And what I knew something was off with that. You know, I'm in communication, so I'm always looking at stuff, right? And I'm like, it ain't resonating, it ain't hit. You need to pull the numbers. And to your point, you start looking at how high black men are voting. Like, with all due respect, we need to start shutting this stuff down. Like, I'm talking about black men as a community. Hey, dog, we ain't talking about, like, clear out, shutting it out. No other community are they talking about. You don't hear them talking about what a white man doing versus a white woman, what an Asian man doing. You don't hear that in no other, but they will come in our community and say, we're going to dictate this. You know, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, she was just on the Cam Newton show, right? So I shot my wife a text and I said, you listen to this? And she said, I got to be honest with you. I was hesitant. I said, why was you hesitant? She said, because I'm just tired of the black man bashing. Bro, when she said that, I can't tell you. Well, my spirit went, right? I was like, you know, just kind of rose up to the top. I said, hold on. Like, it hit differently, you know, because I'm not asking her to consider me like that. Because I know her podcast, I know all that stuff flying, right? I'm not asking her to do that. But the fact that she understood me enough to say, you know what, I got to make sure that my man feels seen, feel heard, feel valued. That went through the roof. And to your point, right? If we are working in tandem with our women, our wives, right? Of course they're going to see when we're feeling neglected, when we're feeling impacted. And again, going back to the stats, if 85% of black men are marrying black women, what are we talking about?
Come on.
What are we talking about? And I'm not saying, like, don't be inclusive of interracial marriages or anything, right? But based upon the data, right, those numbers are so small, we're still talking about a black community. And so if we're not getting to the nuts and bolts of that, like I don't want to hear it. I mean, we were at an event, and I had an older white woman pull me aside and say, "Man, I don't understand why black men vote the way they vote." I said, "Oh, black men vote in election, you know?" And she was like, "Well, they're gonna vote for Trump, man. Your husband vote for Trump?" I mean, she started stuttering. Like, ain't nobody come to your community talking about how your husband is voting, right? And if we get honest about how your husband votes, because I was out canvassing today, right? I'm in here looking at this thing, right? And The man wasn't listed on the minivan at all. Minivan is the app that, you know, folks use when they knock doors and you list whether they're home, not home, what the feedback is.
Your walk list.
Yeah, my walk list. He wasn't listed at all. But that man met me in the driveway. I said, yeah, man, I'm here to, you know, see so-and-so, so-and-so. He said, we good. I was like, yeah. I mean, you ain't listed, bro. I'm talking about your mother-in-law, your wife, your daughter. He said, no, we good. Right? When a black man gonna say, hey, dog, we good? Y'all chill with that. We good. When are we gonna say that?
Well, we don't have anybody in the park to say that.